Hi, everybody. As you may know, today is February the 3rd, and it's, of course, a date that many of us will never ever forget. It is the 54th anniversary of the death of Joe Meek and his landlady, Mrs. Violet Shenton. Joe allegedly shot Mrs. Shenton with a 12-bore shotgun and then turned the gun on himself and took his own life. Over the years, there has been a lot of controversy over if this is really true, whether this really happened. And there's been a lot of different theories on what actually may have happened that day. Many of us, especially members of the Joe Meek Society, and we who were Joe's tornadoes at that time, just to refresh your memories, at that time, Joe's, in fact, last creation of the Tornadoes was Dave Watts on keyboards, John Davis on drums, Pete Hoder on lead guitar, Roger Hoder on bass guitar, and myself on rhythm guitar and vocals. I'll never forget where I was that day. In fact, during the week leading up to February the 3rd, which in that year was on a Friday, the Tornadoes weren't booked to appear anywhere. So we all kind of decided we'd go our separate ways for that week and meet up at the next gig. I decided that I would go up to Bradford, where my then girlfriend, Jackie Grant, she was a dancer and she was appearing in the pantomime Cinderella at the theater in Bradford. And she had a caravan that she would tow behind her car, and she would stay in that caravan, wherever she was performing or working. So I decided to go up and stay with her for that week. And during that week, I spent most every day going to the theater with her, and I would hang out backstage, watch the rehearsals, generally hang out. However, on that Friday morning, February the 3rd, I said, you know what, I don't really feel like coming in to the rehearsals today. Maybe I'll just stay in the caravan and spend the day in the caravan. So anyway, she left and she went to the theater for the rehearsals, and I stayed in the caravan. And I had pretty much nothing to do. I was just hanging around there, and she was parked in a parking lot across from a kind of transport cafe, and I got kind of bored and said, oh, well, maybe I'll go across to the cafe, have a cup of tea or something. And the morning was dragging on, and I was beginning to wish that I had gone to the rehearsals because I was pretty bored. However, it was fortunate that I didn't go to the rehearsals. Probably around noontime, I felt a little tired, and I thought that I might, take a little nap. But something caught my eye up on one of the shelves in the caravan, and it was a little transistor radio. And I said, oh, I wonder if there's any batteries in it. Wonder if it works. And so I took it down, switched it on. Lo and behold, yeah, it worked. And I listened to the radio for a little bit and pretty soon got bored with that. So I switched the radio off and said, okay, I'm going to take a nap. So I took a nap and I woke up probably just a little bit before 2 o'clock. And I said to myself, well, you know, the 2 o'clock news is going to be coming on. Let's switch the radio on. So I switched the radio on and I sat on the edge of the bed and was listening, and suddenly it came across on the radio. Independent record producer Joe Meek, who was famous for the big hit with Tornadoes called Telstar, has been found shot dead in his flat in Holloway Road in London. And no, there was no more information. I jumped up in the air, right up in the air, stood there, turned around in complete disbelief. I could not believe what I had heard. And in fact, I double checked and pinched myself to make sure that I wasn't dreaming and the radio was on and that I had actually heard that news. And I was shocked and I was speechless. I couldn't believe it. And you know, back in those days, we didn't have cell phones. We never had the communication, of course, that you have today. So I couldn't just pick up my cell phone and dial Pete Hoder or Dave Watts and say, did you hear the news? You know, I couldn't, I didn't even know where they were anyway. So I basically had to sit there for the rest of the afternoon with this thought inside of me that our record producer and recording manager and personal manager, Joe Meek, who we were very close to, we loved Joe and he loved us, was now dead and gone. And what in the hell was going to happen to the Tornadoes? You know, were we going to make records anymore? Or it was unbelievable. So when Jackie came back from the hotel, from the theater, I told her the story, what was happened, and I said, look, I'm going to have to go back down to Gloucester. Because for those of you that don't know, I'm originally from Gloucester, and Newent, where Joe Meek was born and where Joe Meek came from, is about 8 or 9 miles outside of Gloucester. And of course, the Hoder brothers, Roger and Peter, they lived just outside of Newent, and they were very close family friends with Joe Meek's family, with his brothers Arthur and Eric, and his sister Pamela, and of course their mother. And I also had the pleasure a few times of meeting the Meek family. So I couldn't think of anything else to do but except to go back down home to Gloucester and try to call the farm where Peter and Roger lived and try to get hold of them and to see if they had heard this terrible news. So I got on the train and traveled all through the night on the train. It was a slow train. Stopped everywhere to pick up the mail. Seemed like I was never going to get to Gloucester. And in the early hours of the morning, I went out and put my head out of the window of the carriage, and the smoke from the steam train was blowing in my face, and I thought to myself, my God, I wonder what's going on in Newent right now. Oh, I'm sure that Joe's mother and his family have got the news. Oh, this is terrible. So anyway, when I got back to to Gloucester, I called out to the farm and spoke to Roger and Peter's mom, Mrs. Holder, and she said yes, they had heard the news, and Peter and was on his way back to the farm. So a week later, on the following Friday, the funeral for Joe was to take place, and we had actually, as the Tornadoes, were playing the night before on the Thursday. I can't remember where we were playing, but we drove all the way through the night, long night, and got to the farm in the early hours of the morning, and so that we could go to the funeral the next day. And after a couple of hours sleep, we woke up, got dressed up in our suits, in our stage suits, and Roger and Dave had showed up. We were all there, and Sandra and Sonia, the Diamond Twins, who only probably about a couple of weeks before this happened, they had just put backing vocals on the record No More You and Me. And that was the last time they and Roger and Dave saw Joe alive. And they arrived, and we got ready and we went down to the church, and they brought Joe's casket in on a trolley, and the service took place, and it was pretty awful. The Meek family, were absolutely stunned. As many of you may know, Mrs. Meek, Joe's mother, who he loved very much, she suffered from arthritis and could hardly walk. And his two brothers, Arthur and Eric, supported her and walked her out of the church. It was the hardest walk she would ever have to make in her life. And strangely enough, nobody of any consequence from show business, nobody showed up. We thought that maybe Hines or some of the old Tornadoes like Clem Catini, or, some people at least would have showed up, but nobody showed up. In fact, the Tornadoes, we were the only ones from show business that were there. And there were also two guys showed up wearing cowboy outfits, and I think they had recorded for Joe, and I'm not sure who exactly they were, but apart from that, there was nobody there. And we then went up to the cemetery, and the whole Meek family was sobbing in tears, especially Joe's sister, Pamela, who unfortunately was killed 5 years later in a road accident. A drunk driver hit her, and she was killed. And Arthur Meek, one of Joe's brothers, when he heard the news, he had a mild stroke, and he never really recovered after it. I don't think any of the family ever recovered, and it wasn't long before Mrs. Meek passed away. So this is a day we'll always remember, we'll never forget. We, as very close friends of Joe and his family, we have one wish, and because many people don't believe that's what actually happened on that day. There's been all kinds of different theories about what happened. Strangely enough, all the police records disappeared, and the autopsy records have disappeared. So there's really no way that we can check. Patrick Pink, who was present at the day that the tragic occurrence took place. He is now passed on, so he was the only one that knew the real truth. But we're hoping that that some information may come to light in the not too distant future, and that we just hope that it will clear Joe and exonerate him from this horrendous crime, which we don't believe he committed, and that way his soul will hopefully be able to rest in peace. Well, thank you very much. For those of you who haven't read it already, this is my book called Do You Come Here Often, which is available on Amazon, and it's also available on the Book Depository in the UK, and they don't charge you for shipping. And in this book, I've told in simple English the whole story of our association with Joe Meek, how we got to go up to London and had a recording audition with him, how we recorded with him some of the little secrets and things he did in his recording process, what it was like to be in a band, a hard-working band on the roads. There's some very funny, some very heartbreaking, and some very interesting stories in this book. So for those of you who haven't read it already, I definitely recommend it. There's plenty of photographs throughout the book. Let's see what we have here. Here's a picture of Joe sitting on the sofa downstairs at his flat. And so thank you very much for listening. And the 54th anniversary of Joe's death has come. And let's hope before the 55th that we will have all found out the real truth of how Joe and Mrs. Shenton died. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.